We make decisions all the time, right? Like small ones.
Hmm.
Should I grab a jacket today?
Okay.
And then like the really big ones, the ones that kind of change your life forever.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
But imagine being in a courtroom. The pressure, right? You're trying to weigh evidence and determine, like, is someone innocent or guilty?
Yeah.
And there's so much uncertainty. It's like trying to like nail jelly to a wall. You know what I mean?
I get that. Yeah.
It feels like that sometimes,
Yes.
right? So today we're going to dive into something really interesting and something that people debate a lot.
Okay.
It's the whole world of probability and statistics,
Huh.
but not just like the regular kind, the kind that's used in legal settings.
Oh, wow.
And in a way, we're going to be kind of like philosophers today.
Interesting.
We're going to be looking at the foundations of how we figure out legal truth, how we arrive at that.
That's a really cool way to think about it. I like that because it's a deeply philosophical question at its heart, right? Like, how should we actually form beliefs and make judgments about things that have already happened
Yeah.
when all the evidence we have is incomplete? It might be contradictory and there's always going to be some uncertainty, right?
It's never perfect.
Never perfect, exactly. So in this deep dive, we're going to explore how probability theory tries to bring some structure to this really messy process.
Mm-hmm.
The process of evaluating evidence and making those big decisions in legal cases.
Right. And for this deep dive, we're primarily using the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on legal probabilism.
Yep, that's our main source.
Really interesting stuff. And you know what? It's not like everyone agrees on this whole legal probabilism thing.
Yeah, that's true.
From what I've read, it's still a minority view.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of really smart people in law and philosophy, they have their doubts. Yeah.
They do. They have some serious reservations.
So it's not like we've found the perfect solution or anything.
Not at all.
It's more like we're exploring a really fascinating and complex debate with huge implications for how justice is served.
Huge. Yeah,
It really makes you think, right?
it does.
How should we be approaching these huge high-stakes decisions
Right.
when we can never be absolutely certain about anything?
That's the big question, isn't it? That's what we're going to be wrestling with throughout this deep dive.
Yeah.
How do we navigate that space between, what we definitely know for sure
Yep.
and what we can only reasonably believe?
Yeah.
Especially when someone's freedom or their entire future is at stake.
It's a lot of responsibility.
It really is. It gets to the very core of how we understand evidence.
Yeah,
What does it even mean to have knowledge?
it's a big one.
It is a big one.
Okay, so let's break this down a bit.
Okay.
What is legal probabilism exactly at its core?
So at its most basic level, it's about using the ideas of probability theory
Okay.
to look at evidence and hopefully make legal decisions better and more accurate. This idea, it's been around for a while. You can trace it back to the early days of probability theory with guys like Bernoulli.
Oh, wow.
You might also come across the term trial by mathematics.
Good.
Tribe came up with that one.
Okay.
It kind of captures that initial excitement around the idea,
Okay.
but also some of the skepticism that's come up later.
Right, so some people loved it and some people were like, I don't know.
Exactly, yeah.
I can see that.
So it hasn't taken over the legal world or anything, but it's definitely gained traction over the years.
Okay.
And especially with fields like law and economics becoming more prominent, in the late 20th century.
Yeah.
It's really sparked a lot of debate.
Okay, so basically it's bringing math into the courtroom, right?
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
But can you give us a more concrete example of how it actually works in a real case?
Sure. Let's imagine a classic murder case, right?
Yeah, the good old murder case.
We'll call the person accused Alice. Okay.
Okay, Alice.
So the prosecution, they present DNA evidence they found at the crime scene.
Yeah.
And it matches Alice. There's also an eyewitness who says they saw someone who looked like Alice running away from the scene right after the murder probably happened.
Okay.
And then on top of that, there's testimony that Alice had threatened the victim before.
Oh, boy.
But Alice, she has an alibi.
Okay.
Her friend Mark says they were together the whole day,
Mm-hmm.
somewhere far away from the crime scene.
So it could be true, right?
It could be. So now we've got this really tangled web of information.
Mm,
How do we even start to figure out what's going on?
right.
As impartial observers, how do we weigh the DNA evidence against whether the eyewitness is reliable?
Yeah.
How do we factor in those threats that Alice made?
Yeah.
And what about the alibi?
Right.
Does it check out?
Yeah.
And ultimately, how do we decide if all of this is enough to say she's guilty?
Right, because in a murder case, the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt, right?
That's right. It's a high bar.
That's a really high bar.
It is.
So we have all these different pieces of information. Some are pointing one way, some are pointing in a totally different direction.
Exactly.
How can probability
Yeah.
even make sense of something this messy?
That's where Bayes' theorem comes in.
Okay.
It's a really key tool for legal probabilists.
Okay.
In a nutshell, it gives us a way to update what we believe about something.
Okay.
In this case, whether Alice is guilty or not,
Right.
as we learn new pieces of evidence.
Okay.
So there are a few parts to this.
Right.
First, we have the prior probability.
Prior probability.
This is like our initial guess about how likely Alice is to be guilty before we even look at the evidence in this case.
Okay.
Then we have the likelihood.
Likelihood.
How probable is the evidence, like the DNA match, if Alice is guilty, compared to how probable it is if she's innocent? So we're comparing those two probabilities.
Okay.
And then finally, we combine these two things together mathematically.
Okay.
And Bayes' theorem gives us the posterior probability.
Posterior probability.
This is our updated belief about Alice's guilt after considering that DNA evidence.
Oh, okay. So it's like you start with a guess,
Mm-hmm.
then you see how the new evidence fits with that guess,
Yeah.
and you adjust your guess accordingly.
Exactly.
But I've always wondered about something.
Okay.
When we're talking about past events, they either happened or they didn't, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
how can we talk about the probability of something that's already settled?
That's a really sharp observation.
It's like it should just be 0 or 1.
Right. That's what it seems like.
Yeah. Either it happened or it didn't.
Right.
So how do you deal with that?
So most legal probabilists, they say that the probabilities we use in law aren't really about the objective chance of a past event.
Right.
It's more about evidence-based degrees of belief.
Okay. Evidence-based degrees of belief.
Yeah. So even though something definitely happened or didn't happen in the past,
Mhm.
our confidence in what happened should depend on the strength of the evidence we have.
Right. So we might never know for sure.
Yeah.
But the evidence can make us more or less confident.
Exactly.
Okay, so the truth of whether Alice committed the murder is a yes or no question.
Right. A binary 1 or 0.
But our belief in her guilt, based on the DNA, the eyewitness, and the alibi,
Yeah.
that can be somewhere on a spectrum.
It can be anywhere along that spectrum between being absolutely sure she's guilty and absolutely sure she's innocent.
Okay, that makes sense. And it also fits with how legal cases work.
Exactly.
You're dealing with these unique, unrepeatable events.
Right. A specific crime, a specific situation.
Yeah, so you can't just rely on general statistics or repeated trials.
You can't just plug it into a formula.
Right.
You have to carefully assess what we know right now based on the unique information we have.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about some of the ways probability can go wrong in legal settings.
Okay.
Because I know there have been some pretty serious miscarriages of justice where it seems like probability was applied in a way that led to the wrong outcome.
Absolutely. There are some really important and unfortunately cautionary tales that show us how easy it is to mess up probabilistic reasoning.
Right.
And how crucial it is to get it right when we're talking about the law.
Especially when people's lives are on the line.
Right, exactly. High stakes, yeah.
Yeah.
One major area where things can go south is assuming independence between different pieces of evidence.
Okay.
Or different events. The Collins case from 1964 in California is a perfect example of this.
Okay, Collins' case. Tell me about it.
So this couple, they were identified based on some unusual features they supposedly had.
Okay, what kind of features?
A black man with a beard, a white woman with blonde hair and a ponytail, driving a yellow convertible.
Very specific.
Very specific, yeah. And the prosecutor, he brought in a mathematician who calculated the probability of a random couple having all these features.
Okay.
And the big mistake here was that he assumed all these features were completely independent of each other.
Okay, independent meaning they don't affect each other.
Right, exactly. So he crunched the numbers and got this incredibly tiny probability, like 1 in 12 million.
Wow, that sounds super convincing.
It does, doesn't it? And the jury, they were obviously swayed by that.
Why?
They convicted the couple.
Based on that number.
Yeah, pretty much.
So 1 in 12 million, that sounds like an open and shut case.
Right. But there was a big flaw in that calculation.
Okay, so what was wrong with it?
The California Supreme Court, they overturned the conviction.
Okay.
And one of the main reasons was that independence assumption.
Okay, right. Because having a beard and having a mustache, those aren't really independent
Exactly.
people with genes for facial hair. They're more likely to have both.
Right, and it's the same logic for all the other features in the Collins case.
Right.
The woman's hair, the car. Even the fact that it was an interracial couple back then.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Those things weren't necessarily independent.
So the math didn't reflect the reality of the situation.
Right, the math was off.
And on top of that, The initial probabilities they used in the calculation, they were based on any real data,
They were basically just guesses.
just pulling numbers out of thin air.
Pretty much.
So that's a big problem.
Huge problem.
This case is a great example of how we can be tricked by these small probabilities.
We can get fooled easily.
Yeah, when we don't make sure things are actually independent.
That's the key right there.
It's a good reminder for all of us, really.
It is.
Not just in the courtroom,
Yeah.
but in any area of life.
Absolutely.
We need to pay attention to those underlying assumptions.
We do.
Otherwise, our reasoning can go way off track.
Exactly.
You mentioned another case earlier,
Oh, yeah.
a really sad one in the UK with a mother and her 2 infant children who died.
Yes. The Sally Clark case. It's another really troubling example.
Tell me about it.
So Sally Clark's 2 baby sons, they died suddenly
Oh.
under very similar circumstances, just over a year apart.
Oh, wow.
And at her trial, this pediatrician testified,
Okay.
and he presented statistical evidence saying that the probability of a child from a well-off family dying from SSIs was about 1 in 8,500.
Okay, 1 in 8,500.
And then to get the probability of both children dying from SIs, he multiplied that number by itself.
He scored it.
He squared, yeah, assuming that the 2 deaths were independent.
Okay, there's that independence assumption again.
There it is again.
So what was the final number?
He got this really tiny probability around 1 in 73 million.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that number, it must have had a huge impact on the jury.
I can imagine.
They convicted her of murder.
But just like the Collins case, the problem was that independence assumption, right?
You got it.
Yeah.
The 2 deaths were treated as if they were totally unrelated.
Yeah.
But there could have been genetic factors, environmental factors, things that made that family more susceptible to suicides.
Right. It's not like flipping a coin twice.
Exactly.
The 2 events could be connected.
Right. And they ignored that possibility completely. So they presented that tiny probability as if it was proof of murder, which turned out to be completely wrong.
So sad.
It is a tragic case. Her conviction was eventually overturned.
Thank goodness.
But she had already spent years in prison.
Oh, gosh, that's awful.
It is. It's a reminder of how statistical reasoning can lead us astray.
It can be really dangerous.
It can, if we're not super careful about our assumptions.
Yeah, and about the data we're using.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about some of the logical fallacies that can come up in legal contexts related to probability.
Okay, good idea.
Like the prosecutor's fallacy, for example.
Yeah, the prosecutor's fallacy is a classic one.
I've heard of that one.
It's really common, and it can be super misleading.
Okay, tell me more about it.
Basically, it's mixing up 2 different kinds of probabilities.
Okay, 2 different kinds.
Let's say we have that blood evidence example again.
Okay, back to the blood.
So a forensic expert says there's a 1 in 20 chance,
Okay.
or 5% chance, of finding a random DNA match with the defendant if they didn't actually leave the blood at the crime scene.
Okay, so that's like saying how rare that DNA profile is in the general population.
That's right, exactly.
Wow.
But the prosecutor's fallacy is when you then jump to the conclusion
Okay.
that there's also a 5% chance that the defendant is innocent, given that we have this DNA match.
So it's like saying because the match is real if they're innocent.
Yeah.
It means it's rare that they're innocent.
Exactly. It's twisting the logic around.
Right. So the expert is talking about how rare the match is in general, not how likely the defendant is to be innocent specifically.
Right. It's about the rarity of the evidence if they're innocent,
Okay.
not the probability of them being innocent given the evidence.
That's a subtle but really important difference.
Super important.
Yeah.
So that 5%, it tells us how unusual the DNA profile is.
Okay.
But to know the actual probability that the defendant left that blood,
Yeah.
we need to consider other things too.
Like what?
Like how likely they were to be involved in the crime in the first place.
Right. Their prior probability.
Exactly. Their prior probability.
And this was also the problem in that Collins case, wasn't
It was that 1 in 12 million number.
Yeah.
That was the probability of any random couple having those features.
Right.
Not the probability that the Collinses were innocent, given that they fit the description.
Got it.
The prosecutor's fallacy, it basically jumps from the rarity of the evidence assuming innocence to the improbability of innocence given the evidence without thinking about how likely they were to be involved to begin with.
Okay, so you can't just ignore that baseline probability.
Can't ignore it.
And what about the defense attorney's fallacy?
Ah, yes. That's kind of the opposite side of the coin.
Okay, so it's the same kind of mistake, but used by the defense.
You could say that, yeah.
How does that work?
It usually comes up as a response to the prosecution's probabilistic evidence.
Okay.
So let's say the expert says there's a 5% chance of a random DNA match in a town of 10,000 people.
Okay.
The defense attorney might then say, well, that means there could be 500 other people in this town whose DNA would also match.
Okay, I see where this is going.
So they argue that the DNA evidence is basically useless?
Because there are too many potential matches.
Exactly.
But that ignores the fact that the defendant's DNA did match right.
Exactly. That's the crucial point.
It's not like they randomly picked someone and their DNA matched.
No, it's not random at all. The fact that the defendant matched the DNA,
Mm-hmm.
that does increase the probability that they were involved.
Right, even if it doesn't give you a 100% certain answer.
Right.
So the defense attorney's fallacy focuses too much on the number of possible matches.
Yeah, it gets hung up on that number.
And it downplays the fact that the defendant is actually one of those matches.
It does.
So the key takeaway here is
Yeah.
you have to understand how the probability shifts
Right.
from your initial belief,
Your prior belief.
yeah, to your updated belief after you see the evidence.
That's it.
You can't just dismiss the evidence because the final probability isn't super high.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about these fallacies.
We have-
Where people misunderstand how probability works.
Yeah.
What about the base rate fallacy?
Ah, yes. The base rate fallacy.
I've heard of that one too.
It's a super common thinking error.
Okay, so what is it?
It's where people ignore the prior probability.
The base rate.
The base rate, yeah.
That's why it's called the base rate fallacy.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
They ignore that base rate when they're looking at new evidence.
Okay, so they're only focusing on the new information
Pretty much.
and not the bigger picture.
Exactly.
You give me an example.
Back to our blood evidence example.
Or back to the blood.
5% chance of a random DNA match, remember?
Yeah, I remember.
So if we just focus on that 5%,
Yeah.
we might think, oh, this person who matches the DNA, they're probably the one who did it.
Makes sense.
But what if it turns out this person had a really low chance of being involved in the crime to begin with?
Okay.
Like maybe they were just in the area at a completely different time for a totally different reason.
Okay, so they just happen to be there.
Pure coincidence.
Got it.
So if we ignore that low base rate,
Yeah.
that initial likelihood that they were involved,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to overestimate how important that DNA match really is.
Ah, okay, so we need to put the new evidence into context.
Absolutely. Context is key.
A rare DNA match means a lot more.
Yeah,
If we already suspected the person anyway,
exactly.
but if we had no reason to suspect them to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
then that match might not mean as much.
It might not.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've talked about some of the ways probability can be misused,
We have.
but how do we actually measure the strength of evidence using probability?
Good question.
It's not just about getting to a final probability of guilty or innocent.
Right, we're right. It's not just about the end result.
Because some evidence feels really important,
Yeah,
even if it doesn't single-handedly make the overall probability go above a certain threshold.
that's a really important point.
Like sometimes a piece of evidence doesn't push the probability of guilt past beyond a reasonable doubt. But it still feels like a really crucial part of the whole story.
I see what you mean.
Like it adds a lot to the puzzle,
It does.
even if it's not the final piece.
Exactly.
So how do we account for that?
So the strength of evidence is really about how much it changes the probability of a hypothesis being true.
Okay, so how much does this evidence make us believe this hypothesis, more or less?
Exactly. And one way legal probabilists try to capture this is with the Bayes factor.
Bayes factor.
We talked about it a bit earlier.
Right.
Basically, it's the ratio of two probabilities.
Okay.
The probability of seeing the evidence if the hypothesis is true,
Okay.
divided by the probability of seeing the evidence if the hypothesis is false.
Okay, so it's comparing how likely the evidence is under two different scenarios.
Exactly.
Okay, and what does the Bayes factor tell us?
So if the Bayes factor is bigger than 1,
Okay.
it means the evidence supports the hypothesis.
Okay.
And the bigger the Bayes factor,
Mm-hmm.
the stronger the support.
Okay, so it's like a measure of how much the evidence shifts our belief.
Yeah, a measure of the impact.
Got it. And what about the likelihood ratio?
The likelihood ratio that's very closely related.
Okay.
And it's really helpful when we're comparing two specific hypotheses.
Like the prosecution's theory and the defense's theory.
Exactly, like guilty versus innocent.
Okay.
So we calculate the ratio of two probabilities again.
Yeah.
The probability of the evidence given one hypothesis
Mm-hmm.
divided by the probability of the evidence given the other hypothesis.
Okay, so again, we're comparing how likely the evidence is under two different scenarios.
Exactly.
And what does the likelihood ratio tell us?
If it's significantly different from one,
Okay.
It means the evidence is good at helping us choose between those two hypotheses.
It helps us discriminate.
It helps us discriminate, yeah.
Earlier, you gave an example with a child rocking
Oh, yeah.
in a potential child abuse case.
Right.
How does the likelihood ratio help us understand that?
So in that example, just looking at one probability by itself can be misleading. The prosecutor might say only 3% of children who haven't been abused rock back and forth.
Right.
So the fact that this child is rocking must mean they were abused.
Right. It seems like strong evidence.
It does, right? But what if it turns out that 3% of children who have been abused also rock back and forth?
Well, so the probability is the same in both cases.
Exactly.
3% whether they've been abused or not.
Right, so the likelihood ratio would be 3% divided by 3%, which is just 1.
Okay, 1.
And a likelihood ratio of 1 means the evidence doesn't help us at all.
Oh, wow.
It can't tell us which hypothesis is more likely.
So even though that 3% seemed low at first,
It did seem low, yeah.
it doesn't actually tell us anything useful
No, in this case.
because it's the same probability under both hypotheses.
Right.
So the likelihood ratio is more informative than just looking at the probability of the evidence given one hypothesis
It's more powerful.
because it forces us to think about both sides of the story.
Exactly, we have to consider the probability under both explanations.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about DNA evidence.
Okay.
It's become so important in trials these days,
It has, hasn't it?
especially those cold hit cases where they find a match in a DNA database.
Right, cold hits.
How does probabilistic thinking apply to that?
That's a great question. Cold hit DNA matches, they bring up some really interesting debates about how strong that evidence really is.
Okay.
So in a regular DNA case
Yeah.
where the police already have a suspect and then their DNA matches the crime scene DNA,
Okay.
that's usually seen as pretty strong evidence.
Right, because the chance of a random match is so low,
Yeah, the random match probability is tiny.
like 1 in a million or even smaller.
Yeah.
So the likelihood ratio in those cases is super high.
Super high. It strongly favors the prosecution.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But with a cold hit, the argument is that
Yeah.
because they've searched this huge database of DNA profiles,
Mm-hmm.
the chance of finding a match just by chance goes up.
Right, even if the person is totally innocent.
Yeah, so their DNA just happens to match by pure luck.
Exactly, and that's a big argument against cold hit DNA evidence.
Okay.
Some people say we should adjust that random match probability
Oh,
to account for the size of the database.
like if the database has 338,000 profiles,
Right.
and they find a match with a random match probability of 1 in 1.1 million,
Okay.
they'd say the real number is closer to 1 in 3.
That's the database match probability.
That sounds a lot less convincing than 1 in 1.1 million,
It does, right?
especially to a jury.
Definitely.
And I think there was a case, the Puckett case, where this came up.
Yes. The Puckett case, that's a famous example where this argument was used.
Okay, but some people disagree with this whole database match probability idea, don't they?
They do. They say it's not the right way to think about it.
So what's their argument?
They say the important question isn't the probability of finding any match in the database.
So,
It's the probability that this specific person's DNA matches the crime scene DNA.
okay.
The fact that they searched a database.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't change how rare that specific DNA profile is in the world.
So even if they searched a database of everyone in the world
Yeah.
and found one match,
Mm-hmm.
that match would still be really strong evidence
It would.
because that person's DNA is still really rare.
It's still unique to them.
Right, but if you multiply the random match probability by the size of that global database,
Yeah.
it would make the evidence seem weak.
It would make it look meaningless.
But that doesn't make sense intuitively.
It doesn't.
So the likelihood ratio approach might be a better way to think about this,
A
right?
lot of legal probabilists think so. Yeah.
Okay, tell me more about that.
There's this analogy from probability theory called the island problem.
Island problem. Okay.
Imagine a crime happens on a small island,
Okay.
and the culprit has to be one of the islanders.
Mhm.
So they take a DNA sample from the crime scene
Yeah.
and compare it to every single person on the island.
Okay, so they're searching the whole population of the island.
They are. It's like their database.
Right.
And let's say they find a perfect match with one person
Oh.
who has this really rare DNA profile.
Yeah.
That match is still strong evidence, even though they searched everyone,
Huh.
because it's still a rare profile.
It is.
So the likelihood ratio approach for cold hits,
Mm-hmm.
it looks at the probability of that specific match
Yeah.
and the fact that no one else in the database matched.
Right, so it takes both of those things into account.
It does. And if you make some reasonable assumptions,
Okay.
the likelihood ratio for a cold hit can actually be stronger than a regular DNA match.
Really? That's surprising.
It is, isn't it? It seems counterintuitive.
It does.
Because we think searching a big database should weaken the evidence.
Right.
But the key is to remember the difference between the strength of the evidence itself,
Okay.
which the likelihood ratio measures,
Yeah.
and the final probability of guilt.
Okay, so two different things.
Two different things. In a cold hit case, the DNA match might be really strong evidence,
Okay.
in the sense that it would be very unlikely if the person was innocent.
Okay.
But if that's the only evidence you have, the overall probability of guilt might still be lower.
Okay. Expert speaker.